Welcome to Moments in History channel. Have you ever wondered how a war that lasted for over a century finally came to an end? It wasn't with a grand treaty signed in a palace, but on a muddy field in southwestern France, with the roar of cannons signaling the dawn of a new age of warfare. This is the story of the Battle of Castillon, the epic final showdown of the 100 Years' War. The year is 1453. The long and brutal conflict between England and France has raged for generations. English kings had once claimed the French throne and controlled vast territories across the Channel. But now the tide has turned. Led by figures like Joan of Arc, France has been on the resurgent, reclaiming its lands piece by piece. The last major English stronghold in the south is Gascony, a region they had held for nearly 300 years. Its capital, Bordeaux, had recently fallen to the French, and the locals, who had deep economic and cultural ties to England, sent a desperate plea for help. Answering the call is one of England's most legendary and feared commanders, John Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury. At nearly 70 years old, Talbot was the embodiment of medieval chivalry and martial prowess. A veteran of countless battles, his reputation alone was enough to make enemies tremble. The French called him the English Achilles. When Talbot landed in Gascony with a small but elite force, his mere presence inspired a revolt, and Bordeaux quickly threw open its gates, welcoming the English back as liberators. For a moment it seemed like English fortunes might be revived. After retaking Bordeaux, Talbot's next objective was to relieve the nearby town of Castillon, which was under siege by a French army. This is where our story truly begins. The French, however, were no longer the disorganized force the English had faced in earlier decades. Under King Charles VII, the French army had been professionalized and modernized, and commanding the siege at Castillon was a man who represented the future of war, Jean Bureau. Bureau was not a nobleman or a knight. He was a master of artillery. He was a brilliant technician and strategist who understood the devastating power of gunpowder. Around his camp at Castillon, Bureau had created a formidable defensive position. He didn't build a stone castle. Instead, he dug a deep, irregular trench, reinforced it with a high earthen wall, and along this wall, he placed his secret weapon, an arsenal of around 300 cannons of various sizes. This was not just a random collection of guns. It was a carefully planned, interlocking field of fire, a death trap waiting for an unsuspecting enemy. On the morning of July 17, 1453, John Talbot received word that the French were retreating. A cloud of dust was seen rising from their camp, and Talbot, ever the aggressive commander, believed the enemy was fleeing. He decided to strike immediately, without waiting for his full army to assemble. It was a fatal miscalculation. The dust wasn't from a retreating army, it was from the French camp followers being sent away to clear the area for the coming battle. Confident, and perhaps a little arrogant, Talbot led his men forward. They first encountered a group of French archers stationed in a priory ahead of the main camp. The English quickly overwhelmed them, and this initial success only reinforced Talbot's belief that victory was within his grasp. He ordered a full frontal assault on the French fortified camp. It was a classic medieval tactic, a brave, chivalric charge meant to break the enemy line. But Talbot wasn't charging against knights and spearmen. He was charging into the teeth of Jean Bureau's artillery park. As the English soldiers, with their banners flying and shouts of "For Talbot and St. George," advanced across the open ground, the French cannons opened up. The effect was catastrophic. The concentrated cannon fire tore through the English ranks, ripping men and horses apart. Imagine the sheer terror. These were soldiers accustomed to the clash of steel and the twang of bowstrings, now facing an invisible, thunderous force that could kill from a distance with terrifying efficiency. The neat English formations were shattered, morale plummeted, and the charge faltered before it even reached the French lines. Yet Talbot was relentless. He rallied his men, and for about an hour, the English bravely but futilely tried to storm the earthen walls. They were met with a relentless storm of cannonballs, crossbow bolts, and gunfire. In the midst of the chaos, a cannonball struck Talbot's horse, throwing the elderly commander to the ground. Pinned and with a broken leg, the great English Achilles was helpless. A French soldier then finished him off with a battle axe, The death of John Talbot was the final nail in the coffin for the English. With their leader gone, the remaining soldiers broke and fled. The battle turned into a rout. The French cavalry, which had been waiting for this moment, charged out from the sides and cut down the retreating English. The defeat was absolute. The Battle of Castillon was more than just a French victory, it was a profound turning point. With Talbot dead and his army destroyed, English hopes of holding Gascony vanished. Bordeaux surrendered to the French a few months later, and with that, the 100 Years' War was effectively over. England lost all its territories in France, except for the small port of Calais. But the battle's legacy extends far beyond the end of a single war. Castillon is often cited as the first major European battle, where artillery was the decisive factor. It signaled the end of the medieval era of warfare, where chivalrous knights and massed archers dominated the battlefield. The age of gunpowder had arrived. The stone castles that had dotted the landscape for centuries were now vulnerable to cannon fire, and the armored knight was no match for a well-aimed cannonball. Jean Bureau's victory demonstrated that tactical innovation and technological superiority could triumph over traditional bravery and brute force. So, the next time you think about the end of the Middle Ages, remember the fields of Castillon. It was there that the roar of cannons not only secured a kingdom for France, but also blew away the old world of warfare, ushering in a new, more destructive era that would shape the course of history for centuries to come. The death of John Talbot symbolized the death of an age of chivalry, brought to a sudden and violent end by the dawn of gunpowder. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as I do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Moments in History channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the past. Let me know in the comments what other battles you'd like to see covered. See you next time.